Thank you, Mr. President. We had an amendment. There was a floor amendment. It is Senate Amendment number 674, and I would like to ask a question of the senator that proposed the amendment. If my understanding is by reading this amendment, which has not had an opportunity to go through any hearings, that the intent of the amendment is to deny the right of school boards to block biological males from going into biological female bathrooms, locker rooms, or any sporting events. Is that correct? And that's Section 1 of Senate Bill 423. Am I missing something here? I'd like to get that clarified. The amendment, as I'm reading it, says very clearly that a board of trustees will now be penalized to the tune of $5,000 a day if they do anything that involves sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, and deny anybody who has that to any use of school facilities or activities.
Well,
correct or not?
Senator Hansen, I
That's
don't know.
a question.
I don't know who you're directing that to, but
that is to the sponsor of Senate Amendment number 674, which is Senator Donati. President, well, I will now address that bill is an extremely controversial amendment, and I could tell several of our colleagues, including members of the majority party, were surprised by what I asked. But what this bill does now, and by the way, the original bill was fully supported in the Assembly, but with this amendment, this is now exceptionally controversial. We have now basically criminalized the school boards of Nevada from dealing with the ability to block biological males from participating in female sports. And since this includes facilities, that would, and I asked LCB, that would include bathrooms, locker rooms, and so forth. So I would absolutely encourage my colleagues to, to drop this as a floor amendment without any hearings on what could arguably be one of the most controversial discussions across the entire nation at the moment is a big mistake. So I would urge my colleagues or the Senate Majority Leader, if we want to perhaps reconsider that amendment, I would like to ask for that, but since it's on there already, I would encourage my colleagues to absolutely vote no or postpone this vote till we have an opportunity to discuss the amendment. The original bill was supported by everybody in the other house, and we were all fine until the amendment was dropped as well, I might add. So in the absence of removal of this amendment, I'm interested in making sure that we protect especially female sports from having biological males being allowed to compete in those types of events, and absolutely want to make sure that biological males are not allowed into biological female locker rooms or bathrooms, which this amendment would now prevent a school board from doing, and would not only prevent them, but would authorize a fine of $5,000 a day for every day that those school boards have that policy in place. So I would urge my colleagues to please reconsider this amendment, and in the meantime, in the absence of reconsideration, to vote no on Assembly Bill 423. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, thank you. Again, this is an extremely controversial subject, and we should absolutely suspend the vote on this until we have an opportunity for both houses, or excuse me, for our house to really get into this, because while it is true we're not criminalizing it, we are going to definitely be fining school boards $5,000 a day for essentially saying that biological males will not be allowed to participate in biological female sports or go into biological female locker rooms. And I can assure you, I would call this amendment the Bud Light Amendment. I mean, that is a major controversy.
It is happening over in Nevada, where state Democrats passed a bill that could fine school boards $5,000 a day if they try to block biological males from participating in women's activities or using women's facilities.
I would call this amendment the Bud Light Amendment. I mean, that is a major controversy across the state. There's an enormous backlash across this country on this very issue. And to do this as a floor amendment and not have any hearings and put it on a bill that originally was fine, which both parties supported completely in the other house, is absolutely an abuse of the process.
Phillips is president of Power to Parents and a Nevada parent, and she joins me now. Erin, thanks so much for being here. What was your reaction when you heard the Democrats snuck this through at the very last minute on the Friday before Memorial Day weekend?
Yeah, that's an important point. Also, graduation weekend, right? So you have a lot of parents who are out there trying to enjoy family time with their kids, go to graduation, celebrate the end of the school year, and you have the Democrats slipping this amendment that we've seen this happen over and over, where parents aren't paying attention because we're out there raising our kids and working, and it's really underhanded.
I think this is underhanded to parents in another way. You have 5 kids, 2 of them are in this district, or in a district where this is going to be impactful here. So basically it takes away the rights of parents by in effect nullifying their vote for the school board in their town, because now the school board can't do anything without the state of Nevada coming down hard on them. Basically that's it, right?
That's right. We think that parents should have control over the policies that are being created in the district where their children attend. These policies are tethered to the families who are the stakeholders where their children attend these schools. And so removing this and taking it and saying, we're going to just hold your child hostage and your school board hostage to a policy that is not right for those families in that district. We see this over and over with these policies as they come at this from a one-size-fits-all standpoint, and that's not how it works. We want our families to be engaged, and the original text of this bill actually was doing just that.
Ditto the previous and future commentators. I do have some alternative topics that we can educate our young people, if that's okay. I would like to share, such as the fact that many not so pleasant trends that's happening. Record numbers of women are hitting their 30s, unmarried, unpartnered, and childless. And this is a serious concern because they have passed their prime years and their fertility is going down. The family structure or family building has significantly declined over the last few decades. And what's ironic here, especially in the state of Nevada, a very small minority of young women, adults, have college degrees, because that's the excuse that they constantly make. We need to encourage men and women to be good candidates, marriage-type material, in order to build strong families. And in order to build strong families, you have to have the quality, which I will discuss hopefully in another time. But other than that, I am glad this topic is being brought up. Appreciate it. Please reconsider.
Thank you. Next caller.
Thank you.
You're smiling.
Always.
That's good. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Janine Hansen. I'm the state president of Nevada Families for Freedom, and we oppose this bill. We are opposed to the cost of the bill, but there are many more costs. Ever since sex education was initiated in the 1960s, we've seen nothing but increases in teen pregnancy, STDs, broken hearts and lives, and more government social services to pay for these things. We are very concerned about this bill because it essentially changes the entire way we've done it. It's anti-democratic, anti-parents, anti-children, and anti-family. It removes from the local sex education advisory committees any meaningful role, and it puts into the Council of Academic Standards for Public Schools to make the curriculum. That is essentially unavailable and unaccountable to parents and the public, rather than the local committees and the locally elected school board. We're very much against that. We're also against the fact that this bill changes who can teach sex education. Right now it's restricted to teachers and school nurses. This opens it up to others in the public, so they'll be inviting groups with agendas like Planned Parenthood into the classroom. We're significantly concerned about that. We're also concerned about broadening the subjects in it and the anti-family agenda, which it includes. One of the final things we're very concerned about is how it changes parental issues. Right now it's an opt-in. This changes it to opt-out. So parents have to affirmatively say they want their children into it. That's how we want it. We want it remaining as opt-in, not opt-out, because that encourages parents, once again, to be involved with their children, which is what we really all want. We want parents involved with their children. So we ask you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Chapman, and I'm the state treasurer of the Independent American Party. And we are opposed to this bill for many reasons, some of which are the bill would change who could teach sex ed to our children. Right now, the school nurse or teacher teaches our children. Who would be coming into the classroom to teach our children, and what would they be teaching? Quote, provider of health care or other person, unquote, is what this bill states. Will the taxpayer be paying these strangers to be in the classroom with our children? We currently have a system that most parents and taxpayers are comfortable with and have a say in. That is the sex education advisory committees. Each county has their own committee made up of parents and taxpayers in that county. This committee would be replaced with an appointed state, quote, council to establish academic standards for public schools, unquote, which is unaccountable to the parents and public. How much money is involved to set this council up and run it for many years? I'm sure it won't be cheap. We, the taxpayers who pay for all these bad ideas, do not want these changes. Appointed state committees, opt out instead of opt in, strangers in the classrooms teaching who knows what, and teaching subject matter that is not age appropriate. We, the parents and taxpayers, say no to this bill. Check the opinion page. That tells the story. No on AB 357. Thank you.
Casey Rogers for the record. You know kids are impressionable, and your attack on our kids and families must stop. There are specific topics I do not agree with, which I will discuss further. First, I quote, when ignorance destroys culture, monsters will emerge, end quote, Jordan Peterson. One of the best ways to understand something is to examine its beginning. Alfred Kinsey, the pioneer of sexual research, studied children while he was sexually abusing them to get to his goal. He did horrific sexual experiments on them. Look up Table 34. And he, to this day, is praised and celebrated in academia. John Money, on the other hand, coined gender ideology and was a psychologist and professor at Johns Hopkins University. Both of these men were pedophiles and leaders in the current movement in sexual education for our public schools. I must say, there are 8 billion people on this planet. All of them were born from a woman, including all of you sitting in the seats today. Every person in that audience was born from a woman. Not one of you were born from a man. And you want me to allow you to educate my child in gender ideology, all of which are lies to the nature of man. And finally, please keep your pedophile, transhumanist, Marxist agenda away from our kids and families. No on AB 357.
Good evening, Chairman Ro Marino and members of Ways and Means. My name is Jim DeGraff and Reid. I'm Nevada's Republican National Committee man in opposition to AB 357 on behalf of the Nevada Republican Party. We testified in the Education Committee on the policy dangers of having the state circumvent the ability of local school boards and parents to determine the sex education curriculum of Nevada schools. Here in the Money Committee, those issues are relevant because the state is proposing to spend $115,000 to take over a process that is already being handled well at the local level, making AB 357 a waste of state resources. Although the fiscal note doesn't address future biennia, it is reasonable to assume that there will be future costs to update and maintain this agenda, just as there are current costs to implement it, so we anticipate future ongoing unnecessary expenses as well. Why do the sponsors of this bill think that they know what's better for Nevada children than the parents of their children or their local elected school board members? This bill attacks local and parental control, attempting to usurp the role of discussions parents should have with their children on health and sexuality, and instead spend state money to bring strangers with ulterior motives who do not work for the school district and are not accountable to parents into a school to have these discussions. Section 2.2 is particularly disturbing with the phrase, to provide equally meaningful instruction to pupils regardless of their level of sexual experience. Why would this be happening in public schools? In Clark County, elementary school principals are being busted in sexual predator investigations by the police. If we're going to spend state money, let's use it to focus on keeping predators out of our schools rather than discussing sexual experiences with minors who cannot consent to sex. Please vote against spending state resources on issues that are being well handled at a local level and vote no on AB 357. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Hi, good afternoon. Good evening. It's been 11 hours. It's been a long day. Good for you folks. My name is Lisa Partee, P as in Paul, A-R, T as in Tom, E-E. Please vote no on AB 357, which removes control of the sex education curriculum from local sex education advisory committees under the elected school board and gives it to a council that's not accessible or accountable and is not overseen by the school district. Thus, we parents don't have a say in what is being taught. This is unacceptable. It changes to opt out rather than opt in, and it allows outside people to teach in our schools with an agenda like Planned Parenthood. It promotes anti-family and alternative lifestyles. More than anything, we should not be teaching about sexuality. Sex education teaches children, or at least it used to, the biological way of reproducing, making babies, and discussing prevention of pregnancy, STDs, and abstinence. Sexuality is an entirely different thing in itself. This indicates that the teaching is going to be based on the idea that the children being taught are currently sexually active. I am sending you an email with definitions as to what sexuality means. And the kids, it's for the quality or state of being sexual. For adults, it's the condition of having sex or sexual activity. We don't want Planned Parenthood to teach our kids about sexuality or anything for that matter. Planned Parenthood is a leftist socialist organization and thus not an appropriate entity to be involved in our kids' education. Evidently, they've been successful in being one of the leaders of sexual education in schools, which is unfortunate. But per their own website, they feel they're experts in teaching about relationships, which I don't feel their values and activism truly support healthy relationships. The nuclear family, that's such a rarity these days, may be demonstrative of that. I believe that we already have a committee within our school district that includes a parent, student, and others. In other words, this subject is covered, and we already have difficulty in reining in what's being taught and promoted in our schools as it is. We don't need to hand the reins over to a leftist organization that brainwashes kids as well as encourages full-term abortions. Additionally, they want access to the kids over several years of education. This isn't necessary. What we need are people to teach responsible behavior and abstinence. And ideally, I wish parents would become more actively involved in this area, but we certainly don't need a council who is unaccountable to the parents and children to lead the charge in this area. Please don't throw our kids to the wolves with this bill. I echo prior oppositional testimony as well. Please vote no on AB 357. Thank you.
Well, for the record, Governor Joe Lombardo. Good afternoon, everyone. Chair Bilbray Axelrod, Vice Chair Taylor, and the Assembly Committee on Education, thank you for having me today. I'm here today to speak about the Safer and Supportive Schools Act, our legislation that addresses school violence, an issue that is top of mind for so many Nevada families, teachers, and students. I know that you are familiar with this topic since Vice Chair Taylor and Assemblywoman Hansen have recently introduced legislation on this critical issue. Over the last 2 years, we have seen countless instances of school violence across Nevada. Throughout my 35 years in law enforcement and 8 years as the sheriff of Clark County, I relied on data to understand crime and to keep our community safe. Similarly, I believe we can look at our school violence data to better understand just how pressing and prevalent it has become in our state. Last year, there were over 6,800 violent incidents reported at CCSD schools within a 7-month period from August 21 to February of 22. Since 2019, there has been a 46% increase in violence and sexual assaults reported within the Clark County School District, but the increase in school violence is not just limited to Clark County. In Washoe County, there have been over 7,400 violent incidents reported within the Washoe County School District in the 22-23 school year. Just 2 weeks ago, there was a fight at Worcester High School in Reno that injured a police officer and 7 students and resulted in 2 hospitalizations. By looking at the data, we know that the increase in school violence is not an isolated issue. It's a statewide issue. We know that tens of thousands of students, families, and teachers have been affected. Like I said, in my State of the State address, I believe that AB 168 while well-intended, has led to this increase in dangerous situations in schools across the state. It handcuffs teachers and administrators, leaving them powerless to address habitually misbehaving and violent students. The data is clear. We don't need any more victims of school violence. And for clarification, I have citations for all the data I just provided to you, and I'll provide it to the committee if requested. To take action, my office submitted AB 330, the Safer and Supportive Schools Act. This bill was developed in conjunction with education stakeholders from across the state, including superintendents, teachers, support staff, and administration representatives. Furthermore, the Safer and Supportive Schools Act has the support of all 17 superintendents in Nevada, the Clark County Education Association, and the Clark County Association of School Administrators, along with key community leaders from across the state. I believe this bill has wide-reaching support because educators, administrators, and community leaders alike see the need for reform in our schools. Just as diverse education stakeholders have come together in support of this bill, I believe we can all put our party differences aside to support AB 330. The heart of AB 330 is focused on three main objectives. First, giving teachers the ability to control their own classroom and do their jobs. Second, giving parents peace of mind that their children are safe at school. And third, giving students a safe and supportive environment that's needed to learn. We believe that there should be zero tolerance for school violence. AB 330 institutes serious reforms to empower teachers and schools to discipline students effectively. While AB 330 delivers serious reforms, there is also significant accountability measures built into the legislation. Every child should be given the opportunity to stay in school, but violent students will not be tolerated. To ensure that this legislation is executed properly, suspensions and expulsions will be monitored, and teachers who are excessively removing students from the classroom will be identified. The Act also increases accountability by allowing intervention by both the state and district superintendents where necessary. Every child should be given the opportunity to stay in school, and the accountability measures in this bill will help just do that. It's important to me that you hear directly from the teachers and administrators who encounter school violence regularly. That's why I'm here today with Denise Paul, principal of Whitehead Elementary School here in Sparks, and Freeman Holbrook, principal of McQueen High School here in Reno today. They're here today to share with you how their schools, their teachers, and their students have been impacted by school violence. Like so many others, they believe that AB 330 will help bring safety, security back to our schools. I'm grateful for Principal Paul and Principal Holbrook for sharing their stories with you today.
Thank you. And to kind of build off of what my colleague said, I mean, I guess that frustrates me, right? This concept that we didn't have funds to implement restorative justice training, even though we received millions of dollars in funds from ESSER funds and ARP funds, funds that still haven't been spent on social emotional learning, which restorative justice and restorative practice are closely aligned. So I think that there definitely were the funds. There was just a lack of effort to provide the support and training to teachers. I have two separate questions, though, that I kind of want to talk about. And, you know, over and over again in this presentation, we heard about flexibility, right? We heard about options for principals. And I'm frustrated looking at a policy here that takes away those options for administrators. Because when we had this conversation in 2019, it was about making sure that in statute, we didn't say that in every single case you do exactly this. Because we don't even do that in the criminal justice system. We say if this occurs, these might be your range of options. And that's not what this bill does. This says, if a student does this, this is what you do. If a student does this, this is what you do. And I think as an educator myself, that seems to really tie the hands of administrators. So can you tell me what options then would be available to administrators, or would it tie their hands?
So again, complex issues. What this bill tries to get at is the violence, is the battery against teachers, is the guns, and is the distribution. What we're hoping to focus on is that by allowing the removal, that we can now focus on tier 1 supports that reduce that. So it really does focus on the determination and trying to get out of, because again, we don't want those other students to compound the issue. And so really allowing time for the schools and districts to focus on tier 1 to reduce that.
And I'm all in with tier 1 supports. Let's provide stronger MTSS training. Let's work with schools. Let's work with educators to do that. But this bill doesn't do that. So to come here and tell me we're having a conversation about MTSS, about SEL, that's not what this bill does. This bill is specifically looking at student discipline. And we need to have a conversation about what this language is. And this bill isn't fixing those things. And, administrator after administrator come up here today to talk about the lack of resources in those areas. And so that's what we need to be having a conversation in. We need to be having a conversation about the vacancies that we have in our schools. Like, this is not a conversation about social emotional learning. This is not a conversation that we're having about providing support to students. My next question is specifically aimed at looking at section, if the chair would allow. Thank you. Looking at Section 7 of the bill, which is specifically removing the rights that teachers were given in 1999 in AB 521, which allowed for educators to remove a student from our classroom. So we're having a conversation right now saying this bill empowers teachers. We're having a conversation. The governor specifically said that this bill gives teachers the ability to control our classroom. As an educator myself, as a daughter of an educator, as a sister of an educator, I'm telling you right now, this bill does nothing of the sort. In fact, it's removing our ability to remove students from the classroom because it completely leaves that in the hands of the principal. And I know because I was there in 2019 when restorative justice rolled out. I was in the classroom when restorative justice rolled out. And we were told schools as a system could not suspend or expel, which is not what the bill did. Just to clarify, there were still things like guns that were completely expellable and permanently expellable. But when I'm looking at the language in this legislation, it's saying that I wouldn't even have the ability to remove a student. And remove is not defined. We probably should go back and define that in statute to be very clear what a removal might be. Because a removal could be, when I think about as in education in terms of removal, that could be removal to counselors, removal in other areas. But then when I'm looking at this language, it says that it's really the principal's call. And I'm not comfortable with that. As an educator in 2021, I had a student that was violent and aggressive in the classroom, and that student was changed classes so that I could be safe in my classroom and my students could be safe in our classroom. And they continued to be at the same school. And this bill would remove that right for me to even have a say in it. It gives it all to the principal. So can you talk a little bit about the flexibility or how this empowers teachers or how this is going to impact teachers?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Torres. So prior to going to...
For the record.
Thank you for the record, Superintendent Ebert. So teachers do have the power to remove students from the classroom. That is the first portion of this work. It is only after the principal working with the teacher and the student and the situation, right? As you noted, every single situation is unique. And in some instances, and I believe you know this data as well, in some instances, the principal needs to interject with the teacher and the student and the family to make sure that the learning environment continues. So it is not to remove the teacher's right, because that is the first layer of this entire bill. This is the very first layer. The teacher does have the right. But we do have instances where additional help and support is needed, and that child needs to be in that class. And that, by working together with the administration, with the teachers, that is the intent here, to move forward as a team and not just as a siloed person, because this is a human structure that we're dealing with.
Thank you. And I guess in close, I don't have another question, but I guess that's frustrating to me, right? That we give because there is nothing that says that this is a team or that this is a conversation or that they're going to work together. It completely disempowers educators from having any say on the culture of their classroom and what that's going to look like. And I would urge the bill sponsor to look at this language, because what it's really doing is taking away the rights of teachers like myself in those instances. And it's saying that the principal has all the power. And this would give the principal, and I know that there will definitely be situations if this were to pass, where principals will remove all power from any educators in their school building to ever remove students, because that's what's going to happen. And this is going to make my classroom less safe. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Proffitt, Proffitt, and I'm the Vice President of the Nevada Republican Club. Thank you, Governor Lombardo. Prayers were answered today when you brought this bill to the floor. Every child has a right to feel safe in an environment that is conducive to learning. So, I find it hard to believe our education department has allowed a handful of students in various districts to disrupt the classrooms, attack, and threaten students with impunity. But as Joe promised and delivered today, he will get shit done. When my child was attacked in Illinois school, I chose to remove both of them and educate them privately. But most parents can't afford to spend $30,000 a year on education. That was over 20 years ago, so the price has gone up. As you consider the suggestions of the committee and tweak the bill, I suggest that the bill be taken one step further. I believe zero tolerance is needed in all violent acts and threats in our schools, because every day students aren't learning is another day Nevada isn't providing them the education we're paying for. I understand the bill empowers teachers to make judgment calls and remove the child, so I respectfully request that you include a clause concerning a teacher's rights regarding the process
you just need to
and their
speak
protection.
to the bill. If you are in support of the bill, it is the bill as written. So
Until our education system has failed, Nevada is at the bottom of the nation, while a handful of students have been allowed to rob every Nevada student of a successful future. And I cannot understand why anyone, especially teachers, would not want this bill to pass if their rights were protected. So I really do ask you to consider that. And I thank you for offering a solution to a failing education system that doesn't include a tax hike.
thank you, ma'am. We'll go
Thank
to the
you
next
very
person.
much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Puena, last name Puaina. I'm representing myself as an 8th grade English teacher. I'm very grateful for the amount of educators that are here represented. I just want to echo what they were saying in Clark County as well. I'm from Clark County. I worked at CCSD, but as people know, I could not believe the behaviors that I had seen. And I just want to echo that, please give us some support. We really do need help. I cannot tell you how many times we've talked about behavior taking away from instruction. We see where I'm at. I'm grateful for the administrators who are supportive and trying their best, but they have repeated to us that it is because of restorative justice that they feel their hands are tied. And if you could please, I beg of you, we are losing educators, and I don't know how many times at my job site that I have to hear a teacher walk away each year. And it weighs on us because we have to think about our test scores and everything, and it really impacts the students. And just to give one quick story, one of the biggest impacts I've ever had was having to see one of my students look at me with tears in her eyes when I had a student just being disruptive every day. And she, with tears in her eyes, said, "Mrs. Puena, please do something about him." And I look at her after restorative justice was passed. We were told we could not kick out students. Now, that may not have been the intention, but that's what the administrators heard. And so I had to look at her and I wanted to say, I want to help you. And it hurt me to look at her when she was like, please, I just want to, that's what she wanted. I want to learn. I looked at the others and it was just one student being disruptive and I couldn't do anything. So please, I beg of you, please think of us and think of the students that really are there to learn. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Committee. My name is Lynn Chapman, and I'm the State Vice President of Nevada Families for Freedom. And we're in support of this bill and encouraged to see that this issue is being discussed in our state legislature. It has been an escalating problem for quite a number of years. Quote, feeling safe at school is is as important to a child's well-being and learning as being safe. Children learn more and perform at higher levels when they feel emotionally safe, unquote, writes Dr. Nora Carr, Chief of Staff at Guilford County Schools in North Carolina. Anne Louise Lockhart, a PSYD and an ABPP, which I don't know what that is, wrote how school violence affects everyone. It impacts children committing the violence, children who are victimized, children who witness school violence, and even impacts school employees and parents. The Crime and Safety Surveys program reported that during the 2019-2020 school year, 77% of public schools recorded that one or more incidents of crime had taken place, amounting to 1.4 million incidents. This translates into a rate of 29 incidents per 1,000 students enrolled in 2019-2020. Not all recorded incidents of crimes were reported to sworn law enforcement. The sooner children learn there are consequences to their actions, the better for the children's futures. Please pass this legislation. It's a good start to the solutions we need to pursue reducing the violence that is out of control in our schools. Our children need us to feel safe and have a safe learning environment, and teachers need to have a safe place to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chapman. Go ahead.
Hey, how's it going?
What's up, man?
You know, you really made my day when you said you voted for Stavros, because I voted for him too, and I voted for the other guy. It's because, and I didn't vote for every Republican ticket, by the way, in the last election. But then it makes me wonder, like, you know, why they won, because it's like they actually knew how to appeal to moderates.
And you know what? Yeah, and you know what? People say, well, Brian, you're this liberal, you know, they use the term libtard. And I say, I voted for somebody like Stavros Anthony. I don't agree with all of his policies, but he's a decent man. He's a smart guy. He's moderate. He can work with Democrats, and he's a decent guy. You know, I feel the same thing about Tim Treffinger. I feel the same way about Mitt Romney, about Adam Kinzinger. Even though I disagree with almost everything Liz Cheney stands for, I have respect for her, you know, and that's important to me.
But here's to talk about, because there was a town hall with the state legislature, Commissioner Sickerbloom, Trustee Cavazos, and I told a lot of my friends who are on the MAGA side to come. Not one of them showed up, and that disappointed me. And, you know, it's one thing you can make good claims about election fraud, but when you're not participating well in the election process, canvassing and going to town halls, you have responsibility. If you guys would have shown in masses, and not in a loud, agitating way, but people could have get a sense of feel that the masses are not happy, and they didn't show up. They make excuses. And I told Tick, listen, how am I supposed to believe that these elections have so much fraud in them?
I agree.
When people are not coming in with frustration. They have every right to blame. And even if there was fraud, if they can work really, 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 they can fear.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. So let me ask you a question, Cyrus. Were you listening to the show a little bit earlier today?
Yes, with Tarkanian and the chokehold. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you make of somebody that comes on the show, and when I ask them if they're a Klansman, they don't answer the question? What do you make of that?
I don't know. I would have just said, "Excuse me." Like, why would you come up with something like that? I mean, the guy was just like, it's sort of like he was driving like he didn't even know how to hit the brakes.
I agree.
And it's like he ran 3 times the red light. But I just want to go back to the town hall. Like, you know, I just went there with a sign that put out no, because I disagreed with many of the things the legislature was pushing. And not every one of them is going to be super nice to me. You know, there's this one woman who wants to make Juneteenth a holiday. And I said, well, listen, I mean, should the people know about the black slavery in the Middle East? Because my parents' country had them too.
Oh, I agree.
And I don't think it should be one-sided.
I agree. Unfortunately, and I appreciate the call, by the way. I got to go to break. Good to hear from you, Cyrus. Thank you. I agree with you 100%. Unfortunately, too many things in life are one-sided these days. People don't know how to work on the other side.